threw my estranged dad a birthday party to reconnect, but he called me a bad daughter in his speech, so I exposed him in front of everyone. He got drunk, then called me from jail and demanding I bail him out. So, I, Daisy, 28F, guess this is a bit of a long one, but I really need to get it off my chest. Growing up, my dad, Richard, 59M, wasn't exactly father of the year. He and I have never had the best relationship. He was one of those people who acted like showing affection was a weakness or something. He wasn't cruel or anything, but he just didn't seem to care much about being a dad. I don't have those sweet childhood memories where my dad taught me to ride a bike or helped me with my homework. He was more of the figure it out yourself type, and honestly, it sucked. When my parents split up when I was around 7, things got worse. My mom was always the one holding everything together, and once she wasn't there to smooth things over, my dad's lack of effort became way more obvious. I'd go over to his place, and he'd barely talk to me unless he needed something. He was always too busy with work or too tired or just too disinterested. Eventually, I just stopped trying. My dad quickly moved on with this woman who had a son about my age. At first, I thought it was kinda cool, like, hey, instant sibling. But I couldn't have been more wrong. My dad became obsessed with impressing his new stepson. It's like he was on this mission to be the fun dad for this kid, and I got left in the dust. The dude treated me like I was some boring old toy he didn't want anymore. Whenever we did family stuff, my dad was always focused on his stepson. Trips to amusement parks? His stepson got to pick all the rides. Family movie night? My stepson got to pick the movie. If I wanted to do something, my dad would act like I was being selfish or difficult. It wasn't just favoritism either. My dad would actively mock me to make his stepson laugh. Like, if I tripped or spilled something, he'd make a huge deal out of it and turn it into some dumb joke. See, even walking's too hard for her. And then he and his stepson would crack up like they were some comedy duo. I remember once I was crying because I'd lost a necklace my mom gave me, and instead of comforting me, my dad told his stepson, "See what happens when you act like a drama queen?" I don't even know what that meant, but they both laughed. It got to a point where I just stopped trying. I didn't bother asking to hang out with my dad anymore because I knew I'd be ignored or made fun of. When I stayed over at his house, I mostly kept to myself. Honestly, I counted down the minutes until I could go back to my mom's place. Maybe my dad always wanted a son and he finally got it in the form of his stepson. Fast forward a few years, and I'm about 16 when things start getting rocky between my dad and his wife. I didn't know the details at the time, but looking back, I'm guessing it had a lot to do with how checked out my dad was when it came to anything. He wasn't really a partner. Eventually, his wife left him. Not just left him, but left him for another guy. I didn't know much about her new dude, but from what I heard, he was way more involved in her and her son's lives than my dad ever was. And honestly, I can't blame her. Here's where things get kinda sad, but also a little satisfying if I'm being honest. The stepson, this kid my dad basically ditched me for, wanted nothing to do with him after the divorce. I mean, I get it. The guy wasn't his real dad, and once his mom moved on, he just sort of drifted away. Apparently, my dad tried reaching out a few times, but the kid barely acknowledged him. He didn't answer calls, never responded to texts. It was like my dad was a distant uncle or maybe even a stranger. Anyway, fast forward to now. I'm in my late 20s, and despite everything, I've still tried to maintain some sort of relationship with him. Not because I'm desperate for his approval or anything, but because, well, I don't know. I guess I hoped he'd mellow out as he got older. But he didn't. So, this whole mess started when my dad's 50th birthday was coming up. Despite everything, I figured I'd be the bigger person and plan a party for him. I didn't have to, but I thought maybe if I put some effort in, he'd appreciate it, and we could finally connect a little. Plus, I knew if no one did anything, he'd just sit around and mope about how nobody cared. I planned this whole thing, booked a nice restaurant, invited his friends, ordered a cake, the whole deal. I even put together a slideshow of old family photos, thinking it might be a sweet way to show him that, despite everything, I still valued our family history. It wasn't some massive event, but I tried to make it special. The party started off okay. People were mingling, my dad seemed happy, and for once, I'm thinking maybe this was all worth it. But then the speeches began. Now, I wasn't expecting him to get all emotional and thank me for everything. I knew better than to expect that, but I at least thought he'd say something decent. Instead, when he gets up to speak, he launches into this weird passive-aggressive speech about how life's been tough because of all the people who drifted away over the years. I was already getting a bad feeling, but then he goes, even my own daughter, my only kid, has become so distant and uninvolved. It's like she's too busy for her old man these days. He said it like it was some harmless joke, but the room got weirdly quiet. You know that awkward silence where people aren't sure if they're supposed to laugh or not? I was mortified. I'm standing there thinking, are you kidding me right now? The guy barely put any effort into being a dad, yet somehow I'm the one to blame for being uninvolved? This man, the one who spent years barely acknowledging me, had the nerve to call me uninvolved? The same daughter who just threw him a whole birthday party? What made it worse was that some of his friends were looking at me like, wow, why didn't you visit your poor dad more? As if I was some awful daughter who'd just abandoned him. Meanwhile, I was the one who planned this entire party. I paid for the food, coordinated everything, and made sure all his friends were there. And this is what I get? I could feel my face heating up, and I knew I should probably just let it slide and talk to him about it later. But I couldn't stop myself. I grabbed the mic and went, yeah, you know what? I am distant. And maybe if you'd actually made an effort to be my dad at any point in the last 20 years, you wouldn't be so surprised. It just kinda came out. And once I started, I couldn't stop. I told the whole room how I spent my childhood practically begging for his attention, how I eventually gave up because it was like talking to a brick wall, and how the only reason I even threw this party was because I still hoped, after all these years, that he might actually appreciate something I did for him. I didn't scream or anything, but my voice was shaking, and I know I was upset. The whole room just kinda froze. People were looking anywhere except at me, and my dad's face looked pissed. He didn't say much after that. He muttered something like, "You didn't have to do this if you felt that way," and stormed off. Most of his friends awkwardly hung around for a bit, but the vibe was dead. I ended up leaving early, too. The next day, I tried calling him because I felt kinda bad about how it all went down. Don't get me wrong. I still think I had every right to be upset, but I knew blowing up at him in front of 50 people wasn't exactly the smoothest move. When he finally answered, he was still mad. He basically told me that I ruined his birthday and made everything about me. I reminded him that he was the one who decided to roast me in front of everyone first, but he just doubled down, saying it was just a joke and I took it too seriously. I haven't talked to him since. Part of me feels guilty. Maybe I should have just sucked it up and talked to him privately the next day. But the other part of me feels that I spent years being the quiet, patient daughter who kept her feelings to herself. And when I finally do something kind for him, he turns around and makes me the punchline. I just snapped. I don't know. Maybe I overreacted, or maybe I was just overdue for that outburst. What do you guys think? Did I go too far? Should I have waited and talked to him privately, or was I justified in calling him out right then and there? Ida? Update 1. Alright, so things have somehow gotten even messier since I last posted 2 weeks ago, and honestly, I don't even know how to feel right now. So, the day after the party, I tried calling him. No answer. I figured, okay, he's still pissed. Fair. I decided to give it a couple of days before trying again. A few days later, I called him again, but it was straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same thing. At first, I figured he was just ignoring me. Then I thought that he might have actually blocked me. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I grabbed my friend's phone and asked her to call his number. Sure enough, her call went through just fine. That's when I knew that he really did block me. I won't lie, but that kinda hurt. I know I embarrassed him, but blocking me felt extreme. I mean, I'm his daughter. You'd think he'd at least hear me out. Anyway, I figured if I couldn't get through to him directly, I'd try some of my relatives. My dad's sister, my Aunt Marie, seemed like the best bet since she's usually the calm, reasonable one in the family. I called her, and the conversation did not go the way I expected. Before I could even finish saying, "Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of Dad," she just went off. Apparently, my dad had already told his side of the story to pretty much everyone in the family, and surprise, he left out a whole bunch of details. According to him, I'd ambushed him at his own birthday party and started airing our dirty laundry just to make him look bad. He conveniently forgot to mention that he started the whole thing by calling me uninvolved and distant during his speech. I tried to explain what actually happened, but Aunt Marie wasn't having it. She just kept going on about how I'd ruined the night and how my dad was so embarrassed and heartbroken. She even said some of his friends felt awkward being around him now because of what I said. At that point, I kinda lost it. I told her I wasn't just going to stand there and let my dad trash me in front of a room full of people, especially after I spent weeks planning that party. But no matter what I said, she kept acting like I was the villain in all of this. After that call, I tried reaching out to a few other relatives, same result. Everyone I talked to was either cold or outright angry with me. One of my cousins straight up said I should have just let it go because that's just how your dad is. Like, yeah, I know that's how he is. That's the whole problem. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. It seemed like no one actually cared about how much effort I'd put into that party or how hurtful his comments were. Everyone just kept acting like I'd blown up for no reason. Finally, I decided to just go to my dad's place and try to talk to him face to face. I figured maybe if I showed up in person, he'd at least give me a chance to explain. When I got there, though, the house was locked up. Everything was dark, blinds shut, no car in the driveway. It looked like no one had been there for a while. I waited for a bit, thinking maybe he'd just gone out for the day. But when I asked one of the neighbors if they'd seen him, they said they hadn't seen my dad in over a week. Apparently, he told them he was going away for a while. No clue where. I can't explain it, but something about that really got to me. I get that he's mad, but to just disappear like that? Without even telling me where he was going? It hurt more than I expected. I ended up leaving him a letter in his mailbox. It was just a short note saying I was sorry for how things went down at the party, but that I'd only spoken up because I was hurt. I told him I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I just wanted him to understand where I was coming from. I even said I still cared about him and that I hoped we could talk when he was ready. That was 2 weeks ago. Nothing. No response. No call. Nothing. I'm honestly at a loss right now. I know I could have handled things better at the party, but I feel like I'm the only one who's even trying here. It's like everyone just decided I'm the bad guy, and no one's even willing to hear my side. I keep wondering if I should have just let it go that night. If I had swallowed my pride and talked to him privately later. But at the same time, I don't know. How long was I supposed to keep letting him act like I was the one who didn't care? I just keep replaying everything in my head, and I feel stuck. Part of me wants to keep trying, but another part of me wonders if it's even worth it anymore. I don't know. What do you guys think? Should I keep reaching out, or just let it go and accept that this is how things are now? Update 2. So, things have taken yet another turn, and honestly, I can't decide if I'm more annoyed, frustrated, or just exhausted at this point. After my last post, I was pretty convinced my dad had just disappeared off the grid. None of my relatives were helpful, everyone was still mad at me, and no one knew, or cared to tell me, where he'd gone. I left that letter in his mailbox and figured I'd just have to sit back and wait for him to come around, if he even did. Fast forward about a week, and I was starting to accept that maybe this was just it. Maybe my dad really was done with me. I won't lie, even though I was still upset with him, the whole thing hurt more than I expected. He was never a great dad, but he was still my dad, you know? I kept hoping that after everything I'd done for his birthday, he'd at least realize I wasn't trying to ruin his life. Anyway, one night I was just hanging out at home, scrolling through my phone, when I got this random text from an unknown number. It just said, "You know, you really should learn some respect for your dad." That's exactly how it was typed, with typos, weird spacing, the whole mess. For a second, I thought it was some random scam text, but then I realized it was my dad. I don't know if he got a new phone or just never bothered saving my number again, but I knew it was him. At first, I was kinda stunned. Like, seriously? After a whole week of silence, this is how he reaches out? Not even a phone call, just a drunk text at, like, 1:30 in the morning. I replied, asking if he was okay, but he was just getting started. "Maybe if you spent less time whining you could be a decent daughter, you embarrassed me in front of everyone," and more like that. I asked him where he was, and he replied with, "Out with real friends, not fake people like you." Apparently, some of his buddies had decided to cheer him up by dragging him out for a night of drinking. I found out later that they'd been taking him out all week because he was heartbroken over what I'd done. I tried to text back and explain that I wasn't trying to embarrass him, that I'd only called him out because he was the one who threw shade at me first. But, of course, he wasn't having any of it. He just kept firing off these sloppy, poorly spelled texts about how I ruined his birthday and humiliated him. One text actually said, "Even your mom left because you take after her." This was honestly so far out of line that I had to just sit there for a second like, did he seriously just say that? My mom has nothing to do with this. They split ages ago, and she's been nothing but supportive of me my whole life. The next morning, I woke up to another text from him. This one is more coherent, but still just as frustrating. Basically, he said he didn't mean to hurt my feelings, but that I needed to learn boundaries and stop making everything about myself. He also said he was taking some space because my attitude was too much for him to deal with right now. I didn't even respond. I talked to my mom about it later, and she pretty much told me what I already knew, that my dad's always been this way, and no matter how much I try to fix things, he's probably never going to change. She told me I shouldn't waste my energy chasing someone who's made it clear they don't want a real relationship. And honestly, I think she's right. I hate that it's come to this, but I feel like I've hit a wall. I've tried to be understanding, patient, and even apologetic, but all I get in return is blame and guilt tripping. Anyway, thanks for letting me vent. I know this whole thing's been a mess, but it honestly helps just to get it out there. Update 3. At this point, I don't even know if I should be angry, disappointed, or just numb to it all. After that whole drunk texting incident where my dad told me I was a selfish brat and blamed me for his miserable life, I figured that was the end of it. I was done chasing him, done trying to explain myself, and just done, period. But of course, my dad can't seem to let things end quietly. About a week after the last mess, I was finally starting to feel like I could breathe again. I wasn't constantly checking my phone for nasty texts, and I was just trying to focus on my own life. I figured if my dad wanted to keep acting like I was the bad guy, that was his problem, not mine. Then, one night, I was sitting on my couch, half asleep, watching some random TV show when my phone rang. It was almost 2 a.m., and I remember staring at the screen like, who in the world is calling me this late? I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up and it was my dad. Thought maybe this was just going to be round 2 of his drunk texting nonsense, but nope. He wasn't just drunk. He was calling me from jail. Apparently, he'd gone out drinking with some of his buddies again, and things went off the rails. From what I could piece together, he'd gotten into some kind of argument with another guy at the bar. One thing led to another, And suddenly my dad was outside, yelling in the parking lot like a lunatic. According to him, he didn't start the fight, but let's be real, my dad's got a mouth on him when he's drunk. I'm willing to bet he pushed things way too far. The cops got called, and because my dad was loud, belligerent, and refusing to calm down, they ended up arresting him for disorderly conduct. And now here he was, sitting in jail, calling me to bail him out. I remember just sitting there, holding the phone, like, you've got to be kidding me. I asked him why he didn't just call one of his real friends to help him out. You know, the same friends he'd been hanging out with all week while ignoring me? The same ones who supposedly cared so much about him? He muttered something about how they couldn't come or weren't answering their phones. Honestly, I wasn't sure if he was telling the truth or if they just ditched him entirely. Wouldn't surprise me either way. On one hand, I was so tempted to just hang up and let him sit there. After everything he'd said to me, after he blamed me for ruining his life, why should I keep being the one to clean up his messes? But at the end of the day, he's still my dad. As much as I wanted to just leave him there, I knew I couldn't. So, like an idiot, I dragged myself out of bed, drove 30 minutes to the station, and paid to get him out. The whole time I was standing there filling out paperwork, I kept asking myself, why am I even doing this? Why does it always have to be me? When they finally brought him out, he looked rough. The first thing he said to me? About time you showed up. Not, thanks for coming. Not sorry for dragging you into this. Not anything remotely grateful. I didn't even respond. I just turned and walked out to my car, figuring he'd follow. He stumbled out behind me, muttering to himself the whole time. Once we were in the car, I asked him what happened, and he just started ranting, saying stuff like, that guy had it coming, and, the cops were just picking on me. I sat there quietly for a few minutes, just listening to him spiral. Then, finally, I snapped. I told him flat out that I was tired of this. Tired of him acting like the whole world was out to get him when the only person screwing up his life was him. I reminded him that I'd spent weeks planning that birthday party, that I'd tried to make things special for him, and all I got in return were insults and blame. And you know what he said? I wouldn't be drinking this much if you hadn't embarrassed me in front of everyone. I actually laughed. It was so ridiculous I couldn't believe he had the nerve to say it. I told him that if he seriously believed his drinking problem was my fault, then he needed to take a long, hard look in the mirror. We didn't say much else the rest of the drive. I dropped him off at his house, and before he stumbled inside, he just muttered, whatever, like a moody teenager. I haven't heard from him since. No apology, no text, nothing. I'm done. Actually done this time. I'm not saying I'll never speak to him again. If he actually reaches out one day and genuinely wants to fix things, I'll listen. But until then, I'm not wasting another second chasing after someone who clearly doesn't care enough to meet me halfway. I can't keep lighting myself on fire just to keep him warm. Update 4. Hi everyone, I have another update. After the whole jail incident, I told myself I was done. I realized I couldn't keep living like that. So, I made the decision to cut him off for good. No more texts, no more bailing him out, no more awkward family events where I had to pretend everything was fine. I texted him and told him, as calmly as possible, that I needed space. I said that I wasn't going to tolerate being treated like garbage anymore and that I wouldn't be answering his calls or texts for the foreseeable future. I told him if he wanted a relationship, he needed to get his act together, period. I didn't expect him to take it well and I was right. Immediately after my text, he just sent a bunch of passive-aggressive texts like, oh, guess you're too good for your own father now. Don't bother crawling back when you're lonely. You think you're better than me? Good luck finding someone else to put up with you. Finally, I blocked him. I figured that would be the end of it and that eventually, he'd just give up. I was so wrong. A few days later, I was home alone one evening, just relaxing and watching TV. Out of nowhere, I heard loud banging at my front door. At first, I thought maybe it was a delivery or something, but the banging didn't stop. I checked the peephole and there was my dad, pounding on the door like a lunatic. My stomach dropped. He looked furious, like he was barely holding himself together. I didn't even open the door. I just shouted through it, I'm not opening the door. You need to leave. That only made him angrier. He started yelling. He was slurring his words and was clearly drunk. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I was shaking so bad I could barely get the words out. The operator told me to stay inside, lock all my doors, and wait for the officers to arrive. While I was on the phone, my dad kept shouting. At one point, he even tried to jiggle the doorknob, and that's when I really started to panic. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later, and as soon as they pulled into my driveway, my dad tried to act like he was the victim. He started telling them, she won't talk to me. And I just wanted to make things right. Like I was some unreasonable monster who left him no choice. Thankfully, the officers weren't buying it. I told them everything, about the threats, the texts, the way he'd been harassing me. One of the officers actually asked me if I wanted to press charges, but honestly, I didn't know what to do. In the end, I didn't press charges, but I did file a restraining order. I hated that it had to get to that point, but what else was I supposed to do? My dad wasn't just being difficult, he was being dangerous. Since then, Things have been weird. Most of my extended family is mad at me now like I'm the villain for getting the cops involved instead of just talking it out. Apparently, my dad's been telling people that I set him up and lied to the police to make him look bad. I'm not even surprised, honestly. My dad's always had this way of twisting things so he's the victim, no matter how badly he behaves. But the thing is, I don't care what anyone else thinks anymore. I know now that I can't fix him. I can't make him see reason, and I can't force him to be a better person. He's going to keep blaming everyone but himself for his problems, and I refuse to keep lighting myself on fire just to keep him warm. I deserve better than that, and I'm finally starting to believe it. I feel that this will be my last update. Thank you everyone for listening to me. I really appreciate your kind comments and suggestions.